Welcome to Full Throttle Talk, the podcast where horsepower meets conversation. From supercars to classic legends, high revving tech to motorsport mayhem, we cover it all. Straight from the driver's seat, whether you're a gearhead or racer or just love the thrill of the open road, you're in the right place. Buckle up, hit the gas, and let's go full throttle into today's episode. Welcome back. It's Full Throttle Talk, and we are ready to fill your minds full of all kinds of interesting, hopefully interesting automotive news. And as always, are my wonderful co-hosts, Greg and Paul. And we're going to roll right in, guys. I'm so excited about some of the topics we have today. I know I've got something really exciting, exciting for me and maybe other Porsche fan types out there that I'm looking forward to sharing. And I just posted on Instagram something really cool. But let's just roll right in. So from our last week, we're doing this weekly. Is there anything automotively that's popped up in your personal life? Obviously I've got my little story to share that you guys would like to share. Maybe Paul, something you bought or sold, or some car you came across you never thought you'd sell or see. And Greg, you just got back from auctions. I was looking at your pictures and drooling. Anything that really is top of mind, the most incredible automotive thing that happened in the last 5 days.
For me, I can't remember the last time, 10 years, 20 years, maybe ever. The first time, if you look at our website, I don't have a Porsche for sale, which is bizarre. We have a BMW CSL, an Audi RS2, which is arguably very Porsche adjacent. And we're actually, I'm rushing around this morning because our photographer's shooting a 328 GTS 87. And we have another GTS coming shortly, and I looked at a 430. So I got possibly 3 Ferraris coming, and fortunately later tomorrow, a long hood, but it feels weird, like out of my comfort zone for sure.
Since you brought up the Ferrari 328, because most people listening are car nerds, so they'll appreciate this. Do you remember when those cars came out when Enzo passed away and what those things were selling for back then? I knew somebody, and these guys were adults, and when I had my car cleaning and detailing business, and these guys, 2 brothers, bought a 328. They paid huge money for it, never drove it. It was going to be their trophy piece. They built a garage for it, stuck it into the garage. That's what they did. And I think they kept, as far as I know, it's probably still in that garage back in Columbus, Ohio. But yeah, those cars are pretty cool. Have you ever driven one of those, Paul, a 328?
Yeah, I've probably sold 308, 328. I think they're very similar experience. I've probably sold a dozen of them over the years. Unfortunately, if you look at whatever the perfect body shape is to enjoy that mid-engine V8, I am absolutely the opposite. I am all torso, short legs, T-Rex arms. And so when I drive one, even though I'm 6 foot tall, I literally have the sun visor in my brow. If God forbid, I got in an accident, it would just scalp me. So I love the sound. I love the gated shifter. But when you can't get comfortable in a position, or I got to lean back like an Italian, where I'm almost in the recline position. So I have driven them. I want so badly to like driving them, and I think they're neat. I just don't fit.
So the steering wheel's offset, and so is the pedal box. So one of the two it's not your fault. It's the ambiance. Greg, same question for you. In the past week, and you've been doing so many amazing.
Well, I think Paul just hit on a tremendous future podcast. Body types by car. Did we just lose Paul? There he is. Imagine how politically incorrect that would be. Like body car, here's the body type, here's the car that goes with it. That would be and I just have to commiserate, because when people ask you, like, what's your dream car? I'm like, well, like a 59 Cal Spider, but then I've never driven one. And you sit in some of these cars and it just kills you. There's some cars you probably never want to drive in because it will no longer be your dream car. And I sat in my buddy's XK120, on the top of the windshield's like right here. It's like, there's no way I could ever own an XK120. And I'm only 6 feet tall. It's not like I'm super tall. Anyways, so incredible week. Arizona, Barrett-Jackson, RM Sotheby's had like a 96% sell-through rate. Then I flew to Cavallino, judged Ferraris there, 458s, Sergio, one-off car. But the most exciting thing that happened for me was for my client. So I only had a couple cars in the Scottsdale sale, but one car was a 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner. And it was a situation where I was reached out to by Sakura's Garage. Shout out to Sakura's. They do a nice job here in Cincinnati, and they asked me to appraise this car. Unfortunately, she lost her husband somewhat unexpectedly, so I went out there and I appraised the car. And then I don't know, 6 months later, they asked me, hey, she needs to sell this car. She doesn't really ever want to see it again, and it's still in the restoration shop. Can you help her out? And so took it to Scottsdale, and because of the price point, $80,000 to $100,000, it had to be no reserve. And I was a little nervous for her, but it turned the situation in from being scared to death of selling this car to making it a fun family weekend with her sister and her sister's husband and her best friend. They flew out to Scottsdale. I hung out with them. I bought them drinks at the Biltmore pool. And, I was not there for the actual auction because I had to fly to Catalina, but I'm watching it on the airplane on the Wi-Fi, and it hammered for like $95,000, top of estimate. And it just, she would have been fine with whatever, as long as it wasn't like super wholesale or something. But it went from a bad situation to a fun weekend that the car sold really strong. So I was super thrilled for her.
So number one, you said 96% sale rate. Is that normal? That sounds extraordinary to me.
It is. Normal is used for Sotheby's. Normal's north of 85, 86%. Now, if you look at, obviously Barrett-Jackson's even higher because, they're 100% no reserve cars. Mecum had a pretty rough Kissimmee. I don't know the final numbers, but I'm going to say it was probably around 65%. But they're really significant business models. In my world, you want an auction house to be north of 85, 86%. 96%, there's only, I think, 5 cars did not sell. So yeah, it was strong. It was good. It was people were excited, good quality cars, which is very important, good mix of cars. And it was a very good auction.
Yeah, that's incredible. So out of curiosity, because that 96% number, was that more about the reserves, the reserves, or not even the reserves, but the estimate ranges being set more realistically? Or is that just because we're seeing a lot of buyers that are entering in with full wallets? Or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. One thing that Sotheby's does so great, RM Sotheby's, is that they want to try to get, they don't just put it out there. It's like they don't just list it on Bring a Trailer and hope the buyers come. They pursue, we have a car specialist meeting either the morning of or the night before, where they go through every lot. Like, who do we have that's interested in this kind of car? Have you talked to them? Give them a call. Like, it's a ton of work before the auction actually happens. And I know not all auction houses do that, because we've had a couple car specialists come over from other auction houses and they're like, wow, I didn't realize you guys did this kind of stuff. So the pre-sale is as strong as the negotiations to get the contracts, and as strong as the post-sale. And so that's why you get like a 96% sell-through rate.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And I see Paul shaking his head. How does that relate to selling? Your business is obviously selling cars too. What the pre-sale aspect, is that important to you as well?
I would say if you don't do the pre-sale part, the chances of actually selling the car for the money it should sell for is significantly reduced. So once I get a commitment that we're going to be selling a car, representing it, it's even before we get the car, I'm doing marketing things to find buyers, to validate the value, I think, and see, and really, like I tell, you get buyers, and Greg probably relates this, that I just want to find one buyer. And I'm like, no, you don't want to find one buyer. You want like 3 feverish buyers that have to have the car. Now, 1 or 2 of them will realize, hey, they're actually only wanted if it's a killer deal. But one guy's tired of looking. And if it's a good car and it's represented well and they feel confident. So before we get the car, while we're preparing the car, if you follow my Instagram, in fact, right before I got on the call, I was photographing and taking videos of the Ferrari 328. We're doing some work on the CSL, and I'm teasing people with social media because I want to keep people engaged. And also the biggest question, like, hey, when is it available? How much is it going to be? And so that when it hits our site, which would be like Greg, when it actually runs over the block, there are already preconditioned qualified people. So we kind of know where it's going to go, And if you don't do it, if you just pick a price, throw it up there, throw it on a bunch of different websites and just sort of sit there waiting. It's like fishing, you know, you load up the boat, you do everything. You don't just go out in the ocean. You go to places that you know where the fish are.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. When I was in college, I went to a mentor of mine. His name was Jack Rosselli, and he had a really beautiful car collection. He had a Ferrari California. He had an original slab side Cobra, all kinds of really amazing things. Probably about 15 beautiful cars. He ended up selling those to a casino in Macau, I think, interestingly enough.
Oh, wow.
But any event, yeah, right, in China, a gambling casino. Anyway, Julie and I at the time had a car cleaning and detailing business, and we used to, you know, obviously focus on hiring customers because they have multiple cars. And I went to Jack, and this is when Julie and I were thinking about expanding the business, and this was back in late 80s. And I asked him for advice about what we should do, you know, because he was one of the most successful business people I knew. And he said, don't try to make your hobby or don't try to make your passion your job, is what he told me. That's pretty much the only thing he said. And he was like an Italian guy who he was like been perfect in like a Godfather movie. He had a bird that hated everyone but Jack named Enzo, a parrot. I'm telling you, it was beautiful. Beautiful. Any event, that was pretty much the only thing he said. And then, okay, you're done. Goodbye. And I thought about that. But I'm seeing you two guys now, and I've met a lot of other people who have made your passion your career. And it's interesting. And we can talk about this another time because Greg's about to have his cat steal something that's in the aquarium back there.
Oh, wow. I didn't think she was in here. Okay.
It is interesting because I ended up going in a different direction, you know, 30 plus years ago. And I'm not regretful of having done it, but it's fascinating to run into two guys like you that still have so much passion, even though your livelihoods are dependent on it. There is a balance there because sometimes you must, well, I guess we could just talk about it because I am genuinely curious about that.
Well,
and others have to be as well.
I think you have to segment it. Yes, I sell the cars I love to drive. And that's a for sure thing. But the biggest difference is like my true passion, which is a subset of that industry of that industry, is rally driving, is going on vintage tours, vintage drives, and doing that experience. And my wife always says, like, well, why don't you organize drives and put on rallies? And I did that for a short period, and I will never do it again because it does make the passion part of what I do a job, just like you said. So yes, I like selling the cars. I like being around the car people, but there's a facet of it that is really my passion part, which, like you said, I'm not going to have a business that runs rallies, put on rallies. I want to pay a fee and go on the event, and that is my vacation. And yeah.
You're consciously aware of the fear of losing your passion. And if you intertwine those things, that's a good piece of advice. Maybe someone listening right now will really appreciate that. Greg, I know you were running tandem careers for a long time, and then you spun off to become a successful, you know, auction representative at RM. But I'm just curious, and you have deep-rooted passions. I mean, you love muscle cars, you love Ferraris, all these different things. And I love every kind of car. But I'm just curious, how do you make it so that you don't burn the emotional candle at both ends with regards to passion and with regards to making money from it?
That's a really good question. And I remember when I had a chance to maybe come on with RM as a consultant, I texted or emailed, I don't know if you guys know Myron Vernus. He's pretty public, you know, great guy. He's got notably one of the most eclectic collections, you know, some JDM cars, some cool stuff. And his response is why would you ever want a job if it's something you love? Because basically you're just going to kill it, you know? And I think my difference is I'm such a gearhead that I'm like, could this passion ever be quenched? You know, hopefully not. And what I have found though is it's almost accelerated my passion because I'm exposed to so many new things I've never been exposed. I've driven cars I've never driven before. I get to see these collections that are just amazing. And the other thing that's cool is I don't necessarily have the desire to own every car. You know, like I can experience it in an afternoon, and I'm like the XK 120. I don't want to own one of those now that I've sat in one and I've been around my buddies. So I get to enjoy cars through the auction format, which I'm sure Paul does too. And not to his level, because I don't get to drive many of the cars unless it's for a client at an auction, which doesn't happen frequent. So No, it's been great. It is a danger, though. I think if I was not as passionate, like there's some car specialists that are like, it's just a job. And they're not necessarily super successful car specialists because I think the client can pick up on that. You want someone that's passionate about your car because typically you're in love with it or it's been in your family for a long time, And so I think those are the folks that people should seek out. People are really passionate about it.
So from a non-automotive industry person, I'll tell you what the cars have represented to me. And I know a lot of my friends, the same thing. And you said, you guys actually taught me something on our first podcast when we were talking about collectors versus enthusiasts. I thought a lot about that, trying to figure out which one I am. I'm definitely more of an enthusiast, but I definitely have been a collector before. And being a collector was not as pleasurable as being an enthusiast for sure. But what I've used cars for is essentially as motivation, as awards, as little tchotchkes that I get once I accomplish a particular goal. And I've been blessed with, Julia's my wife for 34 years, and she's always been 100%. Like I told her this morning, I was thinking about selling a couple of our cars, and she goes, "Why would you want to do that?" It's like, what? A wife that's talking about selling cars. I mean, that's crazy. So here's what I wanted to share. I teased this earlier, and some people are going to be mad if I don't actually share it. So we've been in the process of building a 1955 Porsche 550 tribute. And this is a one-for-one tribute, aluminum body, everything's indistinguishable. It's so exacting that the FIA is going to approve it for historic events and for rallies and races and all the rest of it. And I know Paul used to have a 550 replica too. But Paul, get this. I got a video and I just posted it on Instagram. I'll actually put it in the video that I make for this podcast too, of the Type 547-1 motor. Now you're impressed, aren't you? See his eyebrows?
Yeah, his eyebrows went up on that one.
Yeah, they did. That's finally running in Denmark. I literally got the video like 15 minutes ago, and that's really amazing. So in order to have it FIA approved and do FIA events like we want to do them, maybe even some racing, which I've done before. But yeah, I mean, that thing's coming. And it's like, they check the gauge thickness of the aluminum. I'm saying it like a British person because that's where the body was made, aluminum. They check the belts, the hoses for the brake lines have to be accurate. Every damn thing has to be absolutely exactly the way it was in period. And if it is, they'll actually allow you to rally it in, basically they'll treat it as an original car. Did you guys know that, by the way, what I just said?
I sort of had a feeling of that because you see it at Goodwood Revival. You'll see these cars that are, I think they even point out aren't necessarily the original cars, but they're very correct. I think we've seen it at Monterey historic events. I mean, I knew that existed, but I didn't know how official it was.
Yeah, I was surprised too. And so the company that we ended up hiring to actually assemble all of it out of Kentucky has built, to your point that you just made, has been building one-for-ones for people that have the real cars that don't want to risk them because they're so expensive. So that's the reason I hired them, because they already knew how the whole FIA process worked. Anyway, so hearing that old motor, you guys have heard, Greg, have you have any familiarity with the four cams?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't call it melodic, but let's just say it's nice to hear it plenty, running. But here's what I think is also interesting. The motor that I had made for this, every part in it is new. So it's not an old case. Did you know you can buy completely remanufactured four cams, Paul? Isn't that amazing?
No. I mean, I saw two recently sell at auction. One looked like a complete one that went for $250,000, and the other one was sort of pieces of one.
Yeah.
Still six figures. It makes sense that they make that motor because that motor was in actually quite a few cars. Between the 904s had them, obviously lots of 356s. I mean, a lot. But in terms of, I would guess that motor came in a couple thousand cars in various forms, from 53 to, I don't know, early 60s, mid 60s.
Well, that motor was the first, and there was a bunch of evolutions of the 547 after that they had more displacement, because this thing's only a 1500 cc, But here's what I think is really interesting. So the reproduction motors basically is what they are. Hardly anybody knows about them. And I found out about them because I was at Julie and I, of course, we're at Pebble Beach, and I was looking at a 904 that was on display, and I'm not going to say whose it is. Okay. And then
It's not mine.
Okay. And then I started poking around, and there was no stamping on it. And the guy representing the engine and the car, at Pebble Beach said the whole thing was reproduction. And then he, led me to the manufacturer, the guy who's assembling it for us over in Denmark. And, essentially the guy in Denmark then started telling me about how many four cams that he's building using all new blocks and cylinder heads and everything, nothing from the 50s, that he's built in cars that have sold at auction for multi-millions of dollars. And I just think that whole thing's, matter of fact, one of the motors that he built, he sent me pictures of a car that was on display that's owned by the Porsche family that had one of his motors in it. So,
I think I know that. Yes.
Yeah, you probably do. Yeah.
Well, and that's where like auction houses need to, as long as they know and they haven't been bamboozled, they need to be transparent, because, the guy that you're talking about that builds these is known name, known, like if, like at Barrett-Jackson, you had the Jeff Mays or Jeff Hayes Restomod Corvettes. Well, he does like the best job in the world. So if you buy a Jeff Hayes or Mays, whatever it is, he's probably getting 50 to 100 grand more because it's a known quantity, So if you have a known quantity in that engine casting for these rare Porsches, yeah, I'll hit the value because it's not the original, quote unquote, but not as much as if it's, you just got to be transparent. And I think there's a little wave of non-original engines being okay happening now. I think we kind of went a little too far in the direction of numbers matching and all that kind of stuff because nobody cared for 40 years. And then it became like this super duper thing. And now I think it's kind of going back, well, if it's factory correct and it's good, yeah, it doesn't matter. I think I feel like that's a wave that's coming. I'm not saying it's here yet, but I think that's something that's on its way.
I hope it comes because, for example, early 911S. The only distinguishable thing that makes that an S is that numbers matching engine. The body's the same. Everything's basically the same. Most of the internal parts have been replaced. You can go buy all the parts. So it's this magnesium case that was never really designed for longevity. It was designed for 24-hour racing, lightweight. And I find it ironic that Porsche's Classic is building new magnesium cases, which is like, who wants to put another crappy case back in your car? Like, and it's not numbers matching. And then when you're talking about, Tim, what you're talking about with the 4-cam motor, that I see is viable. Those were aluminum cases, I believe, right?
Yep.
Why isn't Porsche making more of those cases, or are they going to make them?
Well, it's probably because the market's so tiny, it's microscopic. How many old 550s are there rolling around? Not many.
Well, no, but not 550s. But like I said, you've got 356s, you've got some 904s, but really the 356s. I mean, I would venture to say there's a couple thousand cars maybe that came with a 4-cam motor over the whole longevity, obviously different variations. And then you've got now this other world, where there's reproduction cars are going to be okay for competition. I mean, I remember going to Ferrari when they had Monterey Historics. Ferrari was the featured mark, and there was like 30 GTOs racing on the track. And we're sitting there in the audience, at the time, a GTO was probably 9 million, not 70 million. And we're sitting there going like, holy cow, there is, $250 million worth of cars running out there, or $100 million worth of cars, whatever it was. And then I found out many years later, like, oh, no. There were very few original motored cars. I mean, they were GTOs, but or some were reproductions. And it was like you said, Greg, that owner has a GTO that's perfect. And this is sort of their parts bin car with reproduction parts that they do this with. And I was like, I was torn because like, was kind of like seeing behind the curtain really a disappointment? Or maybe if it didn't exist, I wouldn't see it at all. And
well, let's drill down on we talked about this a little bit on the last podcast, but I want to drill down on this because I don't think none of us actually ran to this to the ground, and you're now touching on it. And let's go where the ice is a little bit thin, where we might offend people, because it's conversation worth having. And I'm going to use something I saw on Bring a Trailer recently. So you guys know what a Revology Mustang is?
Don't get me started. Yes, I do.
Okay, well, good, because I already gather where, and Paul, you might want to be firing up the Google to see what a Revology is, but I'll just summarize it and Greg can fill in the blanks. Essentially, it's listed in the Shelby registry. It's made on a Danacore, am I saying that right, body, Greg? And they take
Danacore, I think it's Danacore, but yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you know more about this than me. I'm very grateful, actually. So Julie and I went to see them making these, and I don't remember the guy's name who's make Tom something. And the craftsmanship and the integrity and everything that they're building into these cars is just so amazing. I was almost tempted to want to buy one myself, and I'm not even a muscle car guy, but he practically had me convinced to be one. And now, frankly, I get his emails, and every time I get an email, I take a hard look. But Greg, I mean, sorry, yeah, Greg, can you fill in the blanks? Like, I know essentially it's an old car, it's a resto mod, but it's kind of not because it's a new production car. Can you help explain to the? And then
Yeah.
what I want to talk about is I want to talk about, is that a real Shelby? Because it's in the Shelby registry.
So you guys are giving me so much stuff here. Just one little bullet point. In Arizona, I was at this guy's collection, Ferraris, Cobras, Shelbys, and in a crate was a V12 engine for a Ferrari 250 GT short wheelbase. And next to it was the transmission, because there's someone making 250 GT short wheelbase engines, and he put one in his real car so he could drive the heck out of it. And the original was in a crate in this collection, which is really cool. So if you go back on my YouTube channel, on the Collector Car Podcast, plug there, to my live stream from like 2 weeks ago, I was at the American Muscle Car Museum in Melbourne, Florida. 450 cars, amazing. And he has like 6 of the Revology cars there. And they are stunning. They are gorgeous. You know, I'm a Mustang guy. You know, I'm a Shelby guy. They are what I want in my garage right now. Like, but I can't afford what are they? $350,000, $400,000.
Depending on which one it is. Yeah.
So for layman's, it's the Singer version of Mustangs and Shelbys. Kind of. Like, they don't take carbon fiber body panels, but everything's been touched. Everything's been massaged. The engines usually have 5-liter Mustang engine. Everything is, cruise control, power windows, everything. And I would love to have one of those cars. I think they're gorgeous. I think they're stunning. What's interesting is Mark, who has the American Muscle Car Museum, he's really tight with them because they're both out of Florida. And it sounds like he's pushing them for new models. So I think he had the first 67 Shelby because he wanted one. They were only doing 65 and 66 at the time. And now he's pushing them for a 69 Boss 302. He's pushing for a Boss 429. And in the conversations I had with him, I think both the Boss 302 and the Boss 429s would have 5 liters, but the 429 might be, supercharged or something like that. I was like, the Boss 429 ought to have like a 351, a bigger engine in it versus the 302 personally. But they're stunning cars. What's interesting is he told me the venture capitalist group that bought Singer bought Revology, or a large portion or a large percentage shares. So I don't know if they're not going to obviously condense to manufacturing, but there could be some behind the scenes, support, design, whatever that they can centralize. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I love them. I think they're absolutely beautiful. They're stunning. What was interesting about his collection was 450 cars. He didn't really have any first gen 65, 66, 67, 68 Mustangs that weren't Revology, which I thought was interesting. There wasn't like a 65 fastback with the original 289. They were all Revology cars.
So in case listeners and viewers, if you don't know, Greg is a muscle car guy.
Pony guy.
Oh, yes,
Shelby
exactly. All right. But, I mean, is it a real Shelby? That was the question that you're trying to avoid, my friend. Is it a real Shelby?
I don't think it is.
Okay, it's in the Shelby registry. All right, hold on. Let's take a vote. Paul?
All right.
Paul?
I mean, I don't know enough about these cars. Like a Singer, it is a real Porsche. It is just reimagined, whatever you want to call it. It's a modified resto mod, but it's a real Porsche. I assume these Revology cars, which look fantastic, I really like what they did. I assume they're built on a Mustang chassis. Are they on a period?
I think they're even new. Yeah, the Dyna.
So they're like their own SB100 specialty construction new cars. Then in that case, no. I mean, I it's almost like, I guess a better example would be like Roof. Roof is distinctly not a Porsche. They're their own manufacturer because it's not a Porsche VIN number or whatever. So I would say they're really cool. How they're in the Shelby registry, I think that has more to do with sort of this weird eat your young and strange relationship with the Shelby registry, because some cars you get in there. I mean, it feels almost like a payola to get in there because it adds some credibility. I'm like, that should not be in the registry. It's a great car.
But let me challenge you guys on this, okay? Because if it's Jaguar came out with continuation series of cars, and there's been other manufacturers. Aston Martin came out with a continuation series of cars. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, I mean, there was rumors that Porsche was going to do the same thing. So they pick up where the VIN numbers left off. Are those cars real? If they're not,
because they're made by the manufacturer.
okay.
It's sort of like when Shelby came out with the Series 1. That was an all-new car built by Shelby. And so that was in the registry because the original manufacturer, Carroll Shelby, was building these cars. And that makes sense. But for a third party to go and say, I'm going to build a car and it's going to be part of this, it doesn't make sense to me.
Greg,
it's funny because
Greg got out a book.
Shelby registry right here. And like, there's even the 1991 to 1993 SACC Mustangs, Fox Body Mustangs in here. And I guess maybe it's a badge of like, this is a quality product. This adheres to the standards and the performance that Shelby put out. So we feel like we can put it in the registry. I struggle with the CSX Cobras that you mentioned there, Paul, the 1000 series, because there's a 1000 series, you know, the real ones were 2000, 3000 series. There's 1000, 4000, 5000, 6000, 7000, 8000, 9000 series now that are never touched by, well, one of them was touched by Shelby. So it's an interesting conversation. I think it probably talks to the quality of the build that they feel like we can, you know, we can support this. We think this is a future collectible. This has the, I don't know, you know, the build quality that warrants it.
So, in conclusion, Paul is just basically saying it's Shelby just cashing in on their brand, and Greg is somewhat dubious as to whether or not it's a real Shelby. Did I summarize?
Sure.
Okay. So personally, in my opinion, if it's in a Shelby registry and Shelby said it's a Shelby, it's a Shelby. I don't know how else you could actually say it's not a
But Shelby never said it was a Shelby, right?
Exactly.
He wasn't alive.
Exactly.
Oh, you guys may have got me on that one. A small
I don't think, maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. They kicked it off.
Well,
I mean, notice it doesn't say Ford anywhere on it. You know, I don't think.
I think it does. No. This is a Ford. These cars were actually approved by Ford too, if I remember correctly. Greg's firing up the
No, I'm pretty sure it does. I think it has all the original Ford logos and emblems and stuff.
And just for the record, I believe, again, one of you guys correct me, that it is a Danicore body, or am I saying that right, Greg? A reproduction body.
Yeah, close enough.
But so there's two ways to go about it. You can have them registered in some states as, I guess it's an elaborate kit car type thing with it's not a kit car, but it's not original VIN, or you can find a VIN from a, period 67, just stamp the VIN on there and you're off to the races. So either way, let's move. I have another question I wrote down for you guys as we were talking about this. We're in this era, which I don't quite understand, and I'm not so old that it feels uncomfortable, the pricing of new cars, honestly. When I see some of the pricing that manufacturers are like, Porsche just raised their prices on 911s and Porsches in general by 40 or 50 grand. We have a Ferrari 296 GTS, and that car in particular was, if you compare the pricing of that car versus the previous generation, the F8 and whatever, with the base prices of the options. So there's, from a sort of a mathematical perspective, it seems like all manufacturers, they're either trying to raise prices to keep up with production costs because of inflation, which I'm sure is true, or they're trying to fully price the cars and completely cut out the flippers. So as far as new cars go, do you guys have an opinion? The question I wrote down is, are they overpriced? Are the new cars that, are they overpriced, or are they priced accordingly to what they offer?
I think they're overpriced because I look at my income, like what I wanted, how much it was when I wanted it, and my gap between income to getting what I wanted. And it feels like my income has grown, but what I wanted has gotten further apart. For a new car, like a perfect example. I fell in love with the 991.2 Carrera T. and they were $100,000 when they came out new, and they kind of sold for sticker. And that was in 18 and 19. Come 22, when they launched the new one, and 23, inflation starting to hit, and you build the same car, and now it's 140,000. It's gone up, like you said, 40%. Um, and that's just in a few short years. I do think part of it, I think a majority of it is, inflation, costs of doing business, all the different elements, what they have to do to build a car and be successful with it. I think there's still a small part, especially with Porsche. I think the Porsche looks at Ferrari model and goes, gosh, we want to be like that, where we control the market. We take the flippers out, the speculators out. I think they're going to struggle with it. And I think that I would say a modern day example, which I think it doesn't help, is the ST. There's such a fervor for that car that even when we think it's past pandemic times, we're seeing 100% markup of, dealer markup on these cars. And they're really, I mean, I had a client yesterday, so excited, get a car, and he only had to pay $150,000 ADM, additional dealer markup.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And you're happy about that?
I'm not sure they're selling for that much over in Europe. You guys motivated me from the last show to go and do some homework on the pricing of those things, and I'm pretty sure they're not selling for that significant over a list in Europe, but they are here. And when they originally came out, I was offered one by a friend for 400 over.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And he sold it. I said no, respectfully, with love. I said no, but he said he sold that spot. He was a Porsche VIP.
Yeah. And the VIP program from the 918, the 918 is ending. And so I think this is the last car.
Year.
This is the last car of that. And
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see when that is gone, what Porsche does. They're not going to offer that program again.
They won't. No. And well, I'll tell you what I was told, but I know 3 VIPs, and all of them, and I'm not going to say any of their names, but all of them flipped their spots. So we didn't buy a 918 when they came out because we couldn't afford it. But as we've gotten older, the more and more cool cars came out, I befriended these VIP guys, and they'd sell us their spots. And I could get a spot on just about anything for some $5,000, $15,000, $20,000. I mean, over, and that's fine. I'm willing to pay that. But what the VIPs have all told me now are the dealers that they're buying the cars from, they'll be VIP at the dealer, but ultimately the dealer is going to be the one that's pulling the levers, deciding whether they get the allocations or not. So probably most of these guys are no longer going to be flipping. And Greg, do you have an answer to that question? I don't want to.
I'm torn because I'm kind of a supply and demand kind of guy. But so, if the ST, I'm just making up numbers, but if the ST is 300, but they're selling for 450, I kind of feel like the manufacturer is missing out on it, right? Because they're the ones making this incredible product. But I don't want them to raise the price by $150,000. That's where it gets to be a little bit difficult because I can never afford any of these cars, which is somewhat frustrating. I was in a collection the other day. Porsche guy has 80 Porsches, and he gets 3 spots of some fancy paint job. They only make 6 colors. He said they only have 24 spots, and he's got 3 of these spots. And he orders the same color for all 3 cars. He'll get a Turbo S.
It's that chromo color, right?
Yes.
The one color, green, purple. I've seen one of those for sale, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah. So it's chrome, whatever it's called, but he would get the Turbo S, the Targa, and the Cabriolet in that 3 cars, same color every year. And he's got the allocation for it. And I got a picture of the sticker. The paint option is $116,000. So he's spending almost $500,000 just in paint options on 3 cars that he never drives. And so it's an investment play for him because, I don't know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, these cars are still in the wrapper, literally, and they're a super, super rare paint color that's absolutely stunning that nobody's seen before. And so, Porsches have become investment stocks practically. And that's only going to drive up the price. And when I'm a guy that just wants to drive them, love to own one. It's just, I'm supply and demand, but the way it's going right now, I'll never be able to afford one.
Well, but you're touching on something, the whole PTS thing, we did PTS on a 992 touring. and you paid the extra for it. Cam Ingram sold it for us. This gorgeous car. I didn't personally like the car. We also had a 991.2 Touring, which I liked a lot better. Paul, have you driven both those cars?
I have.
The
And
991 feels, I'm sorry, dear listeners, if you're offended by what I'm saying, but having had both, there's something that there's difference about the positioning in that car with the 992 that I could never get right. And I'm 5'9", so I can fit in anything. But in that 991, it was perfect. So something changed.
I've talked multiple clients off the ledge from selling their 991.2 Touring.
Yep.
Because I don't think there's going to be something like that. I mean, the fact that the engine hasn't really changed, they're at a limit, and now Porsche is just trying to figure out how to make the new car different, and they're making it faster on a track. And my argument is that's not necessarily more fun. That's not the ethos of it. And then you guys got guys like Gordon Murray, who's like, I want to build a car for enthusiasts. And I think enthusiast cars, I think that's why the ST is so hot, is because it supposedly is an enthusiast car. I've heard mixed reviews. I think it's a great car. I've heard mixed reviews.
Okay, you save that because let's talk about that on the next show. Because
I was about to say, isn't the Porsche one the next show, not this one?
Yeah, no, I wanted, but I wrote down a whole bunch of questions that, I want to know what your guys' opinion, and we'll talk about this on the next show. Are flippers done? Because there were a lot of people that were making a lot of money flipping spots. And I want to talk about resto rods more, because no one really seems to talk about the real numbers that are associated with buying a Singer, with doing some of these, other cars. I don't think normal folks, like, until you actually spend the time and doing the homework, you don't realize that a lot of those people, you think they're, in some cases, the last generation, the Singer Classic, we were going to grab one of those spots. And I personally couldn't wrap my mind around a few of the aspects of it. And, they were, mentioning the fact when I was talking to them, they were still selling for significantly. I could buy one for 200,000 less than what they're actually retailing for. But the last ones they made, Singer was smart and they priced them to what the market was. And I'm not so sure those Singer Classics anymore, even the last generation ones, aren't selling for what a lot of the people paid for. But let's not piss the Singer people off too much, because they're like a pack of wolves, and rightfully so. But we can talk about all this on the next show. So I have one last question for you guys for today's show. Okay, here it is. Perfect road, perfect car, perfect companion, or you can be alone. Perfect road, perfect car, perfect companion, or you can be alone in the car. What pops to mind first?
You're springing these things on us here.
I know, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm trying to get notes.
I actually wanted to look at, I just did a rally, and it was almost what you just described. It was with my friends at Driving While Awesome. We did a rally that was in Sacramento, and I'm trying to remember the road number, but we drove out to the coast to near Fortuna, where the end of Lost Coast is. It's just missing. But it's basically from Central California out to the coast. And it's this one road, and it is relentless. It is, I know people talk about Tail of the Dragon, Highway 1, whatever. This road is paved so well. And I was driving my 996 GT3. It was one of the few rallies where I could take something that new, because that's like a litmus test. I really wanted to see on a 2,000-mile rally, like, is that car livable? It was almost perfect for that rally. I mean, and you can attest this, Tim, the 996 GT3 is the newest thing Porsche makes that drives so close to an old thing.
Let's save it for the next show, because I agree. I had one, and it was amazing.
But when I was on that road, and this is like a 50-mile road each way, 50 miles there or 75 miles. So like a 150-mile autocross, basically, on smooth pavement. And the car that came to mind would be a 73 RS.
Oh.
And it would just would be, because there was a couple hot rod early 911s on there that had similar builds, and just listening to them going through the canyons, and it was such a perfect road for a rear engine car.
And by yourself, it's sounding?
I mean, I was by myself in the car.
But perfect road, perfect car, perfect companion, or by yourself? Don't worry, your wife's not.
I'm by myself, and the only one I would maybe consider is my dad, who goes on lots of rallies. And if you watch my videos, half the time he sleeps on the gnarly stuff, which I don't know how he does it.
All right. And Greg, same question for you, and you can choose one of your cats.
One of my cats. I only have one cat. What are you talking about?
All right.
So this is really tough because I kind of go back with memories. And the first time I rode in a 911, my sister and her husband, he's an Air Force pilot, or was, they were living in Aviano, which is in the southern Alps of northern Italy, the Dolomites, I believe. Anyways, his buddy had a 911 and they were going to some party, and I was so desperate to ride in a 911, I squeezed in the back two seats. And this is before I was married or even met my wife. And so driving through those southern Alps of northern Italy was amazing. So I would like to repeat that. And it would be with my wife. And you're gonna say blasphemy here, but I would probably do like an 89 turbo cab. I'm not a fan of the turbo cab, but if I'm in the mountains, I want to see the scenery, right? And so I want to have maybe not even a turbo, but I want a 911 that we can take through the mountains of the Alps there. That would be
you guys are teeing this up perfectly, because the next show is going to be all about Porsches. So you guys are doing an excellent job of creating segue tension for the next show.
How is Greg not in a vintage Mustang 500 King of the Road convertible?
I told you
that's too easy. That's too easy. Because I was going to pick my fastback, and I was going to pick the road A1A from Amelia up to, Tybee Island, because that's always a great run, and I grew up in that area. That was actually my second choice. My first choice was 129, Tail of the Dragon. My parents used to live up there. There's so many roads, so many experiences.
Yeah, I can't do better than that, but I'm not even going to try it. But I'll tell you an experience I had. So we have a 718 Spider RS. We've had a whole bunch of 911s. We've had a whole bunch of other cars, but a 718 Spider RS. Have you either one of you guys driven one yet? Paul, drive one when you can.
The new the new one, right?
The new one, yeah. So and I'll tell you guys where the best roads are. You mentioned Tail of the Dragon. So Julie and I have a little cabin up there. And the Tail of the Dragon, in my opinion, is brutal. Too many motorcycles. It's just every time I drive on that road and anything, I'm always seeing, people run off the road. It's not my cup of tea. The roads to drive on in Tail of the Dragon, and Greg, you got married in Murphy, North Carolina, but are the roads around Tail of the Dragon, because there's hardly anybody on them, and the roads are perfect. I do not know how North Carolina and some of the adjacent states are able to keep the roads so flipping perfect year round. But if you go in season, let's say you're going on the roads other than the Tail of the Dragon roads, you're going to run across the occasional car. But if you're driving in, let's say, late fall when the leaves have fallen and the tourists are gone, there's nobody on any of the roads. And when you're up in those mountains, it's so beautiful. It's, so one of the best experiences I've ever had with Julie this last fall in our 718 Spider RS, blasting around those roads with nobody else around. The only second experience I had, since you asked, was in our when our same roads, but in our 2019 Speedster. So those two cars, and with the top down, of course, because you're right. I mean, there's something about, you guys remember where it wasn't that long ago where people would make fun of people like convertibles? now everyone's wants a convertible.
I think the convertibles, I understand, but I feel like it's a sign of your age. I just find that young people are less interested in them, especially in the Porsche world. I think other cars, but just a quick note for those listening. The road is from Redding. You guys know where Redding, California is, north of Sacramento, and it's completely due west out to Ferndale. Ferndale is known for the home of Guy Fieri. He grew up there, the chef, and it's at the end of Lost Coast. It is 157 miles, Highway 38. If you get a chance to look at it, it is glorious. And it's on one of those roads that no one goes on it because no one wants to go where it ends up, and no one's going to the other direction. So, we went in the middle of a weekday or on a Friday, and it was empty. So.
Do you guys know Matt Farah? I mean, Greg, I think you had him on your. So Matt Farah, we're storing one of our cars out in his West Side storage, and I have to just rave about it for a little bit. That was just a ridiculously good experience doing business with him. Anyway, I asked Matt to draw me a road, essentially a map from where his place was up to Car Week. And he had this beautiful, amazing, crazy ass. Julie ended up wanting to drive on the coast, which we ended up doing. But that road, yeah, I'm going to do the real fun Matt Farrow road this year for Car Week for sure. I don't know which car I'm going to stick out there. Maybe the 550 will be done and I'll drive it out there and risk my life in that, beer can.
We used to do every year for Car Week, I would lead a group of people. And the irony is we never take Highway 1 because all that is frustrating. Well, I take that back. At the end of Car Week, Monday morning, 6 a.m., we leave Monterey and we head down the coast when it was open. And if you left at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning, we could get to San Simeon in like an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
Moving, no one on the road. But other than that, I know the routes he did. There's Highway 25, which is Airline Highway, amazing. 58, which goes from Taft over to Paso. It's like
that was part of it. That was part of it.
58 has every kind of road in one road. It's insane, from tight twisties, sweepers, to just whoop-de-doos where you can just get, and I have caught air over 100 miles an hour in a car, just freaking nuts. But
can I tell you guys a funny story about driving back from Monterey? You guys will appreciate it. I won't make it long. So it was 2 Pebble Beaches, maybe 3 Pebble Beaches ago, and there was a whole bunch of Lamborghini Countachs that were on display. Paul, do you go to the Pebble Beach? Do you do that?
I usually go to the rolling tour on Thursday,
Yep.
and I leave town on Friday.
No. The rolling tour is awesome. We actually have a new friend that his family owns the big ass house that's essentially right on that intersection. And he lets us park. We met him through Porsches and he lets us park there, and, we don't ever have to hassle with the parking, but you're right. You can skip Pebble, frankly, and just watch that gathering of cars. In any event, so there was a purple Periscopo Countach with white interior that was on display, owned by a very famous British car dealer. And the guy makes
Kinston, wasn't it Kinston?
Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad you remember.
Simon? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Have you guys seen the videos that dude makes? Have you watched his videos? Unfreaking real. They're so amazing. So, it's Kitson, isn't it?
Kinston.
Yeah. So I knew this car was, Julie and I and Zoe are in our RS6 Avant, and we're driving down the coast road, and I see way back, some weird shape. And I didn't know what it was. Got closer. I started seeing shades of purple. And this is a carbureted car. And so he ends up passing us, and it's a 2-lane road. If you guys have never been on one, he ends up passing us, and he's like, and then he passes another group of cars, and then he's stuck in traffic. And with the windows up, I could start smelling that the carburetors were starting to back up. And, because the car was probably tuned for higher RPMs and it didn't like sitting in that idly ass traffic. So you could kind of smell the gas, and I was a good bit around him. And I said, Julie, you watch, as soon as the traffic clears up in front of him and there's cars in front of him, he's going to pass and we're never going to see him again. And sure enough, we were past some construction, traffic sped up. And I watched this gorgeous dreamlike sequence of this Lamborghini just dodging out into the left lane, and he went so freaking fast. Over time, the other cars sped up, were pulled off, and I had to end up passing one in a safe zone, of course. And the Avant, the RS6 is no slouch, but I could not see where that purple car went. He was driving. He had to have been going well over 100 miles per hour. Of course, he was just doing it for the health and safety of the car to clear out the carburetors, right? Of course.
Sure.
So we're blazing down, and it was, I figured he must have pulled off or whatever. And then I see cop lights, way off into the distance, way off into the distance. And then I said, Julie, I bet you that's that Lamborghini. And then sure enough, he was pulled over. The little window was down, and he was shoving this big group of, large folder of paperwork to the cop, and we just drove off. But I took some pictures as we were driving by. Julie did it for me, and we emailed him to him because I figured he might want those pictures, and we never heard back from him. But I mean, that was quite a memory. Those are the kind of memories you get from Car Week that you don't get, say, for example, driving around Tail of the Dragon generally.
Simon Kinston, and I'm sure his life isn't as glamour as we think it is, or maybe it is, but.
Yeah. Why? Because he's in the car business? I don't ruin it for me. It's not. I went ahead.
No. I mean, he does.
James Bond.
Yeah, he does have, and in fact, I listened to a podcast. I think he was on talking about that scenario. I can't remember. It was a while ago, and I can't remember.
You know what's funny is he got his start as a hairdresser.
Yeah, yeah. But
So
I think
I was a candy guy. He was a hairdresser. We're both dealing with cool cars. It's awesome.
he was something with Donald Osborne, but I think it was him. But I remember, that car was questionably legal in the US because you have to get like a car visa. I forget what it's called, a card. It starts with a C. It's literally a visa for your car to be there, like a person working there. And it was questionable. And so I remember seeing it at Car Week, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, it's got British plates. I don't know what plates were on it.
He did. It had the European plates on it. Didn't have US plates.
No, and they wouldn't, but you do need like certain paperwork to be like, just when you go get a tourist delivery, they give you like a temporary European plate or something. But I saw that car. I don't even know if you could see behind me, but I've got Countach's up here. My friend took that picture on the Autobahn in the 80s of a Countach going by. It's our logo. So I just get moist with a Countach.
Okay, so this is a good. You all can tell when the podcast has peaked when Paul is talking about getting moist. So we're going to give Paul a bathroom break, and look forward to our next podcast. The next podcast and YouTube is going to be all about Porsches. So get ready to take lots of Porsches notes, and we're going to talk about all the things from the VIP program. We're going to talk about. I'd love to talk about some of the fakey do night. There's. What's the old joke? For every one real 73 RS, there's like, 5 that are claiming to be real, all the things. So we're going to talk about that on the next show. In the meantime, thank you for listening to Full Throttle Talk. And the next podcast comes out in about a week. Have a fantastic week.